Community spotlight. As mentioned, we have Rachel Roberts. She's a data analyst from Flow Analytics. Rachel is actually an old colleague and dear friend of mine, and Flow Analytics is somewhere that I used to work. So I like this company a lot, and I think they're a great local company that they do a lot of interesting work. Some of it that's very relevant to the community in the region. So I think I was excited to have someone from this company, and especially Rachel, come talk about the work that she's been doing with Tableau. So I will leave it at that and let Rachel take over from here.
Thanks, Ryan. Let's see. I will start sharing my screen. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ryan. Ryan was actually the person who introduced me to Tableau when we were working at Flow together. So picked up and learned a lot. Like Ryan said, my name is Joel. I'm a GIS and data analyst at Flow Analytics. I've been working for Flow for the last 5 years, and I started out as a GIS technician after graduating college. I got my degree in environmental studies and geography from the University of Washington in Seattle, and I am currently based out of Portland, Oregon. A few fun facts about me before I start talking about work. I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii, and after 18 years of living on Oahu, I got island fever and decided to move to the mainland for college. I love sparkling water, but I can't burp, so I typically can't have more than 2 carbonated beverages at a time. And lastly, I'm a big fan of wine, and I just joined my first wine club last month, so I'm very excited about that. So back to work. Like I mentioned, I've been with Flow for the last 5 years, and Flow is a GIS and data analytics consulting firm, and we have offices in Portland, Seattle, Boston, and Denver. And so for those of you who don't know what GIS is, it stands for, oopsies, how do I go back? It stands for Geographic Information Systems. And so a lot of the work we do is rooted in space and geography. So as a consulting firm, we work in a lot of different business sectors. So we do work for school districts, utilities, conservation entities, local governments, and recently we've started doing work in the political redistricting realm, which has been really fun and interesting. And then as far as the work that I do, a lot of the work, or a lot of the projects that I work on is for our school districts and political redistricting clients. And I often use a combination of ArcGIS, Alteryx, and Tableau to complete my work. And since this is the Tableau user group, I'm going to mostly focus today on how we use Tableau for our school district clients. So for some background, we've worked with around 38 school districts to date on both the West and East Coasts. And some of our clients include Portland Public Schools, the School District of Philadelphia, San Diego School District, and Camden City School District. And the types of work we do include siting analyses, student enrollment forecasting, and enrollment modeling. And so we've got demographers and population geographers on staff that analyze student and land use and demographic data. And then we also assist districts with enrollment modeling to help them with some of their long-range planning. That's typically focused on attendance area boundary reviews. So the boundaries that determine where kids in a district attend school. And then we also help them assist with program placement, grade reconfiguration. So for example, converting a K-8 to a K-5 and the opening and closing of schools. And with some of the work we do, we often run public processes. So there's a big aspect of community engagement in some of the enrollment modeling work that we do. And so the dashboards that I'm going to show today are part of this bit of our work. So I'm going to start by speaking pretty high level about 3 of the dashboards that we've used for some of our school district clients. And the first one is a community engagement dashboard. So at the beginning of our processes, we have a sub-consultant that does parent surveys. And this is so that we are able to better understand what is important to a community. So for example, how important is maintaining the ability to walk to school? And we get these results back from our sub-consultant, and we are able to tabulate the results in Tableau. And what we typically do is we'll share these results through a dashboard on the district website. And that way the district has access to it as well as the public and, you know, those who are taking the survey. The second dashboard I have today is for our baseline data assessments. And so once we compile all the necessary data for analysis, so that's forecasts, demographic data, student enrollment data, we put it all together in a dashboard so that the district is able to review the data to make sure things are accurate. And then it's also nice so that we have a place that we can go to when we start our enrollment modeling processes so that we can review the current state of district facilities and schools prior to kicking off any enrollment modeling processes. And then the last dashboard we have is for options development. So when we're actually doing the enrollment modeling, and this is something we often use in community meetings. And it serves as a quick way for committees that we work with to review different options that we present. And then oftentimes in these meetings, we're working with the committees to redraw boundaries. And so they're able to use this as a tool to further explore different options. And this is the dashboard I'm going to be talking about in a little bit more detail today. And so the example I'm using is for Harford County Public Schools, and they're located on the East Coast in Maryland. And the work that we're doing is to help them balance enrollment across the district. And so they have some schools that are over capacity. So those are the schools in the dark orange. And then they have other schools that are under capacity. So less than 65% utilized, and that's the light blue polygons. And basically, in order to provide a more equitable education experience to all the students in the district, they're trying to better balance enrollment across each of their schools. And so that's where we come into play. And this is important not only as a balancing effort, but all-day pre-K is going to be mandated at the state level. And so we're helping them plan for the future and making sure they have adequate room at each of their schools for that piece. And so with boundary changes and enrollment modeling, one of the first questions we ask is how can we draw the elementary, middle, and high school boundaries to balance enrollment? And Harford is one of the bigger districts that we've worked with. And so there are over 50 schools we're reviewing as part of this process. So it's quite a bit of data to work with. And that's where Tableau has been really helpful. And so our workflow for modeling boundary changes and enrollment is spread across 3 different softwares. So we use ArcGIS, Alteryx, and Tableau. And we use ArcGIS to manage our spatial data and to redraw boundaries. And then we have a data model set up in Alteryx to model the changes that come out of GIS. And so for Harford, we're only modeling boundary changes, but for other districts, we've had to model changes to program placement, grade reconfigurations, and student choice zones. And so all of that happens within the Alteryx model. And then lastly, we kick it out to Tableau where we can visualize the changes and explore the data further if we think additional changes are necessary. The Alteryx model typically takes less than a minute to run, and it updates the Tableau dashboard on the fly. And so this is a workflow that we use when we're preparing for these processes and then in the community meetings. It's a very iterative process. So oftentimes we're running dozens and dozens of options before coming to a recommendation. And I'm gonna, let's see, pop out my PowerPoint. Can people hopefully see the dashboard?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So this is the dashboard that we use during our community meetings. And I'm going to start by explaining what's here on the left side. So because the district is so big, we broke it down into different regions to help the committee focus in a bit and not feel so overwhelmed. So that's what this drop-down menu shows us. So if you wanted to look at a different, oh, because I'm in the north, if you wanted to look at a different part of the district, you could select that and it would filter down what's being shown on the map and then some of the enrollment information being shown on the right-hand side. The colors represent whether a school is within its target enrollment. So typically we want things to be within 3% of the target enrollment. So when the map is colored gold, that's good. When it's under their target enrollment, it's going to be in green, and then anything in red is sort of an area that we need to work on. So for example, Magnolia Elementary School, it's a bit full. So we would want to look at moving students out of this school into its surrounding attendance areas. And then right now what's being shown on the map is the 2026 forecast. So that's how many students we think are going to be attending a school in 2026. You can also switch between 2019 and 2026. So you can see how things sort of change as we look out towards the future. On the right-hand side, we've got some general enrollment statistics per school. So general seats, so that's how many seats are available at a school. We've got the enrollment objectives. So that's ideally how many students you would like to have in a school. And then we've got 2019 enrollment, 2026 forecasted enrollment, and then for each of those, whether they are over or under their enrollment objective. And then down here on the bottom, we've got some demographic information. So the number of English, or the percentage of English language learners per school, the percentage of students participating in SPED programming, and then a race breakdown for each of the schools. So then this dashboard gets updated every time we redraw boundaries in GIS. We run our data model in Alteryx, and then this gets updated and we can just refresh the data there. And it's been a pretty slick process for us. I'm gonna go back to my PowerPoint. Let's see, how do I do that? Okay. Yep. Okay. So now I'm going to talk through an example of how it was used in the meeting. So what I'm showing you all here is what we call the Springboard. So this is the option we initially presented to the working committee. And like I mentioned, ideally when everything is balanced, all the boundaries or all the colors on the map are gold. And so we presented this to the committee, and we can see that North Harford is under their target enrollments. So we were looking to them to suggest changes to the boundaries that might better balance enrollments in this region. And so they had 3 different suggestions. So we implemented those suggestions and we reran the model, and this was the result. And as you can see, it wasn't as balanced as the first option we started with. So now we can see that Jarrettsville, that elementary school, is over its enrollment, North Bend is under its enrollment, and Norrisville and North Harford are within their target goal. So we needed to move some of the kids from the school in red to maybe the school in green. So then the committee decided maybe we don't make change number 3. And these were the results after removing the third change that they suggested. So as you can see, all the schools are in the gold, and that's what we like. So usually at this point, the committee votes on whether they like it, and if they do like it, the boundaries then go through another public review process, and then either to the school board or superintendent for approval for maybe the following school year. And that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Rachel. We have about 5 minutes for questions if anybody has them. In general, I think it does a great presentation, and you did a really good job of stepping through the process, showing us your dashboards. I think it's a really interesting and cool use case of a technology stack, GIS plus Alteryx plus Tableau. So yeah, and also it sounds like you have to do this and it has to be a really flexible tool to use, because you come up with scenarios, you run it through the committee, that committee has to say yes or no, or say, what if we do this? And then you constantly have to iterate on this, right? So you're kind of constantly going through that circle of tools to make this work. Anyway, that's a really interesting use case of Tableau, especially. Does anybody have any questions for Rachel? And if you have questions, feel free. You can unmute yourself and put them in the chat, or sorry, unmute yourself and then talk, or you could put your questions in the chat. It looks like we do have a question from Tiffany. It says, this model assumes all schools are the same, achieve the same results, which may or may not be true. It's one thing to recommend moving X students to a different school district, but how to incentivize students to move between districts is a whole nother challenge. Does your org address that?
That is one of the challenging, I would say, aspects of the work we do is, sometimes in the community's eyes, not all schools are the same. And so we do work pretty closely with the district and their communications team to sort of work on messaging for that. And I wouldn't necessarily even say it's messaging. It's sort of, I would say, educating the community on what each of the schools has to offer. Ideally within a school district, what a lot of school district administrators would say is that, all schools within the district are great. So whether you're attending school X or school Y, you're still going to get a good educational experience. And that's sort of why we do some of the work we do, is because if you have a school that is, 120% utilized, like how could you be getting as good an education if you were within a certain threshold? And that's something we work with the school districts to sort of metric out.
Thanks, Rachel. Another question was just the data as input to, I think, probably the projections that you run, because it sounds like you do projections a few years out. Where does that data come from? Where do you get it?
Yeah, we get data from a number of different sources. We get a lot of information from the districts themselves. So we get student data from them, and oftentimes we request historic student information from them so we can look a few years back. We also pull data from the census, and then we also do a land use analysis. So we're often working with the local municipalities to acquire residential development data. So we're trying to look at, how many single family and multifamily homes are going to be built in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's some information that we get through just literally hopping on a phone call with them and trying to figure out what's going on.
There's another question about logistical challenge. I think it's a similar question, but logistical challenges involved with moving children from one school to another, transportation, busing, or all these fairly close geographically. And to tack onto that, the idea that, are all of the boundaries like succinct geographically, or is there movement of students between schools that aren't necessarily geographic based? If that makes any sense. Maybe and how do you deal with that?
Are you like talking about?
Well, like special education, for example, might not.
Oh, so sort of like boundary exceptions. So like you don't attend the school that you're supposed to. We do take a look at transfer rates between schools, and that's something that is built into our data model. And whether it's, transferring due to parent choice or transferring due to a special education program, that's something we are accounting for. Transportation can be tricky, at least with Harford County. We've got some really rural areas, and then we've got some really dense areas. And so typically we do request that someone from the transportation team from the district is involved in these meetings. And so oftentimes they'll review options or proposals, and they'll chime in on whether something is feasible or not. Something we do take a look at, though, on our side is like walk zones. So whether a student can walk to a school and whether it's within, a mile and a half or a mile or whatever the threshold is for the district.
Awesome, that makes sense. Well, we're about at 1:30 now. Thank you, Rachel. Great presentation. Also, great answers to some tough questions. I imagine that your work is going to get more interesting and busy as there's a change in migration patterns in the U.S. that's happening that was sort of accelerated by remote work and COVID, and I imagine that's going to mean that school districts in certain areas are rapidly changing. So I imagine you'll be busy in the next few years. Well, thank you, Rachel. And then next we have Chris Williams, who is one of our leaders of this of the TUG, of the PDX TUG, and he is talking about actions and how to effectively use them. So this is kind of a good presentation for everybody, and I'll hand it over to him and look forward to your presentation, Chris.
Right on. Thank you, Ryan and Rachel. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to speak with you today. Hopefully you can hear me fine. So let's get into this, and I'm going to share my screen and we're going to do some stuff here. So I'm Chris Williams. I'm part of the TUG. For those who don't know me, I'll give you a little background, a little bit about me. I am the Chief Technical Officer for my company, Precision Analytics Group. We're based out of Portland, COVID certified, we're a small business and a minority business entity. We are a business analytics consulting firm. So we focus on Alteryx, Tableau, and data design and data cleansing and a bunch of reporting. So I've been in the industry for about 27 years. And specifically in Tableau desktop and Tableau server for about a decade, which seems like an eternity. It's quite amazing that it's been 10 years already. So let's talk about dashboards. So dashboards contain multiple views that you can use a filter or highlight, or you can use other actions to display. So I look at a dashboard as like a little application. These actions can go ahead and make you able to navigate through that dashboard. So you have dashboards that contain web page objects. You can have them hold URLs. You can have them hold images. You can have them hold Tableau worksheets. So we use these actions to add context and interaction to your visualizations. So if you have an end user who's trying to navigate a dashboard and trying to go from level to level to get information so he or she can complete whatever they need to in a day, actions will help do that. And these actions can also be applied at the dashboard level as well as the worksheet level, and I'll get into the differences between the two. Starting now. So a dashboard action is an interactive element on the Tableau dashboard that is driven through from the worksheets. So when you click on a worksheet, you can have it do a bunch of different things. You can either have it go through the filter. You can highlight a particular measure or a particular item on there that you want the user to draw attention to itself to. You can have it go straight to a URL. So say, for example, you want to go to, some sort of Google, and you can have, whenever you click on something, have it send it to Google. You can go to a specific sheet, and you can also change parameters. And I'll go into detail on some of the more detail on some of these, and maybe give some examples when I get into my demo portion of it. So worksheet actions are very similar to dashboard actions. You'll see the exact same menu when you're trying to set it up. However, the primary difference is that the worksheet, when you put an action on a worksheet, that worksheet will always perform that action, no matter what dashboard you put it in. And when you actually put that worksheet on a dashboard and you click on actions, the first thing you'll see is already the actions that are set up for that particular worksheet. So when I set up an action on a worksheet, that just means to me that I always want that worksheet to behave the same way no matter where it is. So in the dashboard, I may have a worksheet that may act certain ways, and then on another dashboard, I may want it to act differently. So worksheet actions kind of takes that choice away. It's very rigid when it comes to that. But in essence, the reason why you would do that is because you want the behavior to be the same all the way through. So let's get into the types of actions you have. The one I primarily use, and you'll see in my examples, is filter, being able to take information from one worksheet or a series of worksheets and push it to another child worksheet or a child dashboard. Highlight is what I mentioned a little bit earlier, where you want to, when you click on a certain item on your dashboard, you want to call attention to a mark. So if you have a mark that says, okay, we have the percentages, we're not quite ready with this, these user story points, which I'll get into. Maybe it's fallen below a certain threshold, like 50%. You can use this highlight function or highlight action to draw attention to that and say, hey, this is important, you need to see this, which is essentially what you're doing there. You can have it go to a URL. You basically create hyperlinks to external resources. So if you want to have a dashboard that's basically a one-stop shop, you want to have, if you want to send it to a URL after that, or as a result of that, and have your users go right to your dashboard all the time, this is something that you can use to keep it as a one-stop shop. You want people to go to your dashboard, you can go ahead and access the URL from this dashboard. So basically encouraging your dashboard homepage. Go to Sheet is another one that's kind of sneaky, and I kind of use it often because there are times in which I just wanted to go to another sheet. And I don't want to necessarily use JavaScript to do something like a back button or something like that. Go to Sheet is really sneaky useful, and I'll show you how I use it. And I think could be very beneficial to anybody who wants to try to create sort of like a, literally like a web application. You can also, with the change parameter function, if you have a parameter on here in your application, in your workbook, so to speak, and you want to have a specific item on your dashboard or worksheet change that value, you can do it. You can use that with this option here, and same with change set values. If you have, say for example, you want to circle, you have a set that you've already created in your worksheet, and you want a visualization to change that, or a worksheet to change that, you can send parameters to do that. Okay. Now, I'm going to set the table for a demo, and I'll show you all this within Tableau. What I was tasked to do by one of my clients, Kaiser Permanente, was to create a Scrum dashboard. And so this will basically put in one application. I would track all the releases, all the user story points, and the Scrum teams and the process throughout their release. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and share this, and I'm going to go from here. So there's a product view, there's a release view, and then there's a team view. So the product view would actually take a look at the product and how that product is going through for a particular release, but only at the product level. The release will look everything at all of your story points through per release. And the team will take a look at the Scrum team and being able to go ahead and say, the Scrum team is doing this and this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate straight to the bottom, and then I'm going to go right back to the top of this application. And then I will go ahead and explain how I use actions to get there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this go to release. And this will show me for this particular release that is in, August 1st, 2017, these are the two programs that are for this release. They are in good space because the overall program score is 80. And I basically tell you what the release health is and what the Scrum, what this green actually means. So I'm going to go into here and I'm going to click on this. It's going to give me a little bit more detail on the program. I can also change release here. My release health is 100%. My Scrum management is 0, and the reason why that is because they haven't actually filled out the survey data, which is what we're looking for, probably because that the release health is 100%. So these are the individual experiences that we have within this particular program. So if I click on here, this takes me down even further. So if I wanted to go back and take a look at this one, give it a little bit, everything's 100% done. So last stage I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and then you can see this, and I'm going to get into great detail in a moment, but I want to go all the way down. So this covers the say-do, what they've done, what we've done in the last 5 sprints, the status, which is 100% done. Talk about the burn up. We calculate the velocity for this Scrum team and what they should be doing, and how many points we have left. Ultimately, you want everything to go down to 0 by the time this release is over. But we have 12, but that's okay. In some cases, those will be actually shuttled back and forwarded off to the next release. So as I matriculate back, I'm going to show you how I use actions to make sure that you understand what I'm doing. So this right here is an example of what I use a dashboard action. So if I click on dashboard actions, what I do here is I take a look at all of these. These are like go-to sheets. So if I were to open one of these, it's basically, hey, I want this team view to go to this Scrum team, which is the overview. So it's basically a single select, and I'm telling you to go here. So this is an example of a go-to sheet action that I would do, because I'm not interested in passing arguments. I just want it to be a navigation. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I'm going to go right back down to the release view. This guy here, and I'm going to bring you up to dashboard actions again. Now I have a filter action in here too. So once again, I created a back button basically for a go to sheet action. I created the back button, and that would navigate me back to, in this case, the DevBash homepage. So back buttons had been an issue, and there are a bunch of different ways to do it. I like using a go to sheet action at the dashboard level to do it. And all this guy is just a worksheet with a arrow on it. That's all I did with it. I find it kind of useful and kind of sneaky as a back button. I don't need to do any Jedi mind tricks with JavaScript on here. I just use a go to sheet action for it. And so that's pretty helpful. The filter is important because I'm actually sending everything to it, everything to the next page, but I kind of want to go to the next page so I actually spread out a little bit more. So that's dashboard action. So here, what I want to do is I have 2 specific filter actions when I click on the experience and I click on the score. So if I move this a little bit here, the experience is one of these. So if I click here, this is going to take me to this program overview, and I'm going to pass through these. If I click on this, this will take me to a survey view, and that's another thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this experience, and I'm going to edit it. And I'm going to expand this guy so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So these are the particular fields. So since I'm using this experience as the action that I want to have people click on, it's a single click. And what I'm doing here is I'm basically sending it to this target dashboard. And these are the sheets on this dashboard. And I wanted to pass these arguments. I wanted to pass at least the experience and the release name to all of these different data sources, which are responsible for these target sheets here. So as you notice, I have an experience state, I have the title, I have a summary, and then I have a product score. So all of this information here, which is really 2 fields spread across over, I think 4 or 5 different target data sources, I pass these 2 values, and they're named differently in certain areas, but the main idea is to make sure I pass these arguments to these data sources so that when I get to this page and I pass and I go to accessing anytime, anywhere, I go here. So now that we've gotten to this point, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a worksheet action that I did. So you notice when I clicked here, you saw a menu rather than just going from one place to the other. So I'm going to go right to this worksheet. And I'm going to show you the action that I created. So right here, I want all of this to be selectable. And the reason why I want it to be selectable is because what I was tasked to do was to make sure that the end user, when they got down to the experience, they were able to see a bunch of different things. They were able to see their defects and get a detailed exposure on what defects were still open if there were any. The release performance, which I drove all the way down and showed you before, but you could also see the Scrum scores, and the Scrum scores would be from the survey data. And the Scrum teams would give you a detailed detailed view on who is on that Scrum team and what they're doing. And the main reason why I decided to use a worksheet action to do this was because every time anybody encounters this page, I want them to go to those 4 places only. There's not a discussion. These are the 4 things that I want them to know when they're looking at this page. So no matter what dashboard you want to put this worksheet in, I wanted to behave the same way all the way through. So that's why I decided to put a worksheet action in here. So when I go back to the dashboard, I'm going to go back to this here real quick. When you see dashboard actions, check this out. These are the worksheet actions. So the reason why I bring that up is because those actions are already there. So these worksheet actions will definitely supersede whatever you're doing for the dashboard actions because it includes it in there. And then lastly, you have the back button, which is to go back to the program overview. So as I'm going through this just gives you, and the menu gives you an opportunity to go ahead and choose. Where do you want to go? Choose your own adventure, so to speak. So when I click on this, maybe I want to see the Scrum teams. Maybe I just do this. This gives you an idea on what Scrum teams there are. So if I click here, these are all the people on the Scrum team. Now maybe I want to go back. I go back to this, and now here I am. So, and that's another go to sheet action. So one of the reasons why I created this for Kaiser was because I wanted them to have, or they wanted to have actually, an application to be able to see how well their releases are going, how the releases are going, how well their Scrum teams are doing within that release, if their velocity is correct. And it's a hierarchical data. This is all pulled from Jira. We integrated, QC defects from there, SurveyMonkey data in there, and threw it all into one-stop shop to create this sort of, detailed Scrum application. So being able to use actions to navigate throughout was really what separated this application from some of the that I've built in my career, because this, without actions, without the worksheet actions here at this level, or without the dashboard actions here, you have kind of a disjointed application. And actions themselves can really make this turn into a web page rather than just a dashboard that maybe does one or two things. It gives you the navigability, and it gives you flexibility within that navigability. So maybe I don't want to see this release anymore. Maybe I want to change this. Maybe I want to go down to 4.4, or maybe I want to go to 5.2. This gives you the opportunity to go here and select a whole bunch of different things. And I'm going to go something where you just don't see. And so now we probably want to see why this is red. And so I'm going to click on here, and I see that we have 8 points left that we still need to do. And then we have 2 defects here. So when I click on this, maybe I want to see what those defects are. And now this goes into another level of saying, okay, this is what we've got. This has been open for all these days. We still don't have it done. It's in progress and want us to do. And these are the bugs. So now you have an opportunity to sort of, navigate back to your experience view, and then maybe see something else. Maybe you want to see the performance. Maybe we want to see what's actually happening. So all of these, I can click on this and go right back to the defects overview. So all of these, well, this is pretty much standalone, these guys, but these have another worksheet action, or a dashboard action rather, I'm sorry. And this will be able to give you all of this information. So I've just unloaded quite a bit on you guys. So I wanted to take a little bit of a pause and try to get an idea if there are any questions.
Chris, I know I had one that seemed to be echoed in the chat. You use Sheets to do just the basic dashboard navigation, even if you're not passing a filter. Is there any reason you're using a sheet rather than one of those navigation buttons?
It was just a personal preference at the time. It was just one of those where I kind of created, they wanted a look of a back button at the time. So I basically said, I can create a sheet and put the button that you want to see there. And it was just more of a requirement a personal preference requirement that they had. And I just followed with it.
Cool.
Yeah, that was, there are a multitude of ways to accomplish that. And I threw probably everything I could at them before we settled on this. So that was the only reason why I used to go to Sheet for the back button. It just, they were like, oh, that looks great. Can we change the back button at some point? Sure, we can. If we do that, then I'll probably just create a sheet and just change that. So there we go.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the OG way of doing it before they added the buttons.
Very OG, very OG. For absolutely. Any other questions that you guys might have? I see some popping up there. Or maybe not.
Another question is was this a big, or did this help save time at Kaiser, and what was the big picture advantage for them with this dashboard?
So the big picture advantage for them was really to give everybody a view on how well the releases are going, how well these teams are going. You can look at different Scrum teams and say, okay, this is what's happening here. Are they doing well? If someone is 100% and you have another team that's in red, like this particular release where you may have something like this, where you have something where a team may be struggling, then they would come here and maybe pull somebody off a team that's in green and put them onto the team that's in red. So it gave some visibility back to, you know, who's available and who's not, trying to get releases that were behind back on schedule. So this saved them a lot of time. Now, granted, there are some individuals who didn't really like having their programs out front and center like this because they don't want to be, you know, under the microscope while they're trying to work. But at the end of the day, it did save a lot of time and a lot of money, because if someone was already, you know, available, then that person could be pulled because you track the velocity on the team, and you pull it until that individual or those individuals to help that other release get you know, on time, or if they're behind, get them back on schedule, and then put them back into the Scrum team so that Scrum team doesn't fall behind. So it really did help them give more visibility on what releases might be in trouble. You obviously want to catch something before it's red, but if it's in yellow, then you may be able to have a situation where, okay, it's in yellow, we may need to start pulling people to help get this release out or this product back on track. So in that aspect, yes, it really did help them. And you know, you can look at it by product, you can look at it by a whole bunch of different things. So giving them the three-dimensional view on how everything is going really did provide their internal leadership an understanding on how well things were going. Hopefully that answered your question.
There's a couple more questions, but since we're getting close on time, did you have additional pieces to this presentation that?
No. I'm
we're
good.
done. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Another question was around extracting data from Jira, and if you know anything about how the process there.
Yeah, I mean, Jira, trying to get information out of Jira was fun. I just basically, I created some things to throw it into an Oracle database, and then I extracted the information from an Oracle database. I did a similar situation with SurveyMonkey and pulled that in and created a one-stop shop. Before I used, I wanted to use Alteryx. I didn't have it available to me, so I basically did old school Java code and pulled it in an ETL process, and pulled it from Jira and put it into the Oracle tables, and I pulled from there.
Brooke says it sounds fun.
It was character building. This would definitely be an Alteryx
type 2 fun.
Alteryx affair if I had my way, but that's okay. I had to go on the fly.
Yeah, not every client has it, unfortunately.
That's fine. Yeah, it like I said, character building.
There was another just a comment, but one I wanted to echo as well. Said appreciate the info on why there are worksheet actions versus dashboard actions. This is something that I actually haven't spent too much time thinking about, and a lot of that's because you often just build sheets that go to a single dashboard. But it totally makes sense that you would use a build worksheet actions for the worksheet if that worksheet were meant to be in multiple dashboards. So yeah, that totally makes sense.
It's just, and this will be the last thing I'll leave you with. It's like worksheet actions are really kind of final. And what I mean by that is like, you really want to be sure that when you put an action on the worksheet, that you want that worksheet to behave the same way, no matter where it is. If you have any question whatsoever whether that's going to be true, then create a dashboard action, because then you have more flexibility between dashboards on what you want that worksheet to do. But in this case, I really wanted this worksheet to only do those 4 things and only go to those 4 areas. So that's the only reason why I use those.
Do we have any other questions for Chris?
So I'm gonna throw this back, and I had the questions, y'all beat me to it. But if you ever want to reach out to me, please feel free to find me on LinkedIn. Drop me an email too. Love to talk with you. follow me on LinkedIn, and let's continue doing some Tableau fun. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. We have a couple minutes left, so we could probably fit in one more question. I see one from Alexander. Are there any minor technical things to look out for when creating dashboard actions for troubleshooting purposes? For example, I would find that for a dashboard, the filter action works, but the highlight action does not, and I have not identified the reason.
I like the filter action because if it's not being passed, I could just put it up on my screen and it'll show me what's going on. You can do a similar thing for the highlight. I haven't really used a ton of highlight actions because usually when my clients look for the filter, everything on there is important. So they kind of just want to look at the entirety of the page. But I would use a highlight action if there's specifically, like I used it in one case when I did some spatial, and I wanted to have this particular area where I had a measure attached to it highlighted. And so if it's not doing it, then what I would do is almost just sort of trace back on what I'm passing it is in the right area. But highlight actions can be hard to sort of track and trace if you're not careful. You just have to be really meticulous. Unfortunately, there's really no sort of debugging, golden ticket, so to speak, when it comes to that.
Cool. Well, we are approaching 2 right, exactly. So I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Rachel Roberts, and then Chris for your presentations. Great meeting today. Both presentations were awesome. So I appreciate it. And then everybody on the call, we'll see you next month. Thanks, everyone.